Well, you've done as much research as you think you need. You have a really good understanding of your subject, and you're ready to start writing. What now? Over the next few videos, we're going to look at the details of things like the outline and the body. But for now, we're just going to look at them as part of a big picture. A research paper is formal. It's not text. It's not a blog. It's not an email. It is not a tweet. There is no place in a formal research paper for emojis or abbreviations. Just the facts, please. Now let's talk about the 5-paragraph essay for a minute. You probably have a bunch of these in your past. I want you to think of college writing as similar. It's just bigger. You will have your introduction and your conclusion, and we'll talk about those later in the module. But instead of 3 body paragraphs, you're going to have from 2 to 4 main topics. Each of those is going to end up with several, usually 3 or 4 paragraphs to support it. The most important thing to take away from this slide is that a paragraph makes 1 point. Let me say that again, 1 point. It should be between 3 and 5 sentences long. Since you need to provide supporting evidence for each of your points, every paragraph will need at least 1 citation. Hopefully, you noticed during your research that staying on topic is kind of hard. Rabbit holes are amazing. Every topic is much larger than your research question allows for. The reason for the research question is to help you stay focused, but sometimes you will find it is not working for a reason. Most likely it's not narrow enough and you're finding way too much information for the space allowed. There are just too many subtopics for you to ever finish writing. It's perfectly fine to make choices to limit yourself and edit your research question. Less often, you're not finding enough information. Again, you have to look at how narrow your research question is.
When you say something nebulous, you could be setting your paper up to incite an opinion. Statements like these are how news reports get taken out of context and mass hysteria gets started. Does many mean 6 or 600? The inciting statement is, many protesters were brutally beaten. The truth is, people use words like this intentionally because they want to evoke an emotion, but the information they have isn't sufficient to do it, so they drag out a word with many meanings to do it for them. If you demand a specific answer, the person trying to get away with ambiguity ends up saying, "I don't know," or giving some other evasive answer. Here is another example. A lot of soldiers did not die by getting wounded, but by disease. That is a truthful statement, no matter how poorly written, but it doesn't have any meaning or impact. If you use words like this, your work will not be taken seriously by people who know how to think for themselves. If you want to be a mainstream journalist, use all these qualifying words you can. For college classes and most professions, use only accurate, provable facts. Find out before you write, and more importantly, before you believe. Let's take a look at some absolute words and some more qualified alternatives. Qualifiers come in 2 categories. Some are designed to create ambiguity. Use of these qualifiers can make you sound unsure of your facts. It can also make your writing too informal. Others create universal or absolute claims. It is very important to distinguish between these types of claims, in which you are asserting that something is true always and everywhere, and more particular claims, in which you are asserting something but recognizing that your claim has limits. There is a legitimate use for qualifiers. Sometimes you want to demonstrate that your facts are insufficient or not enough research has been conducted or is available. Clarity is important, but using qualifiers to mask the fact that you don't have supporting facts is unacceptable. Even worse is using ambiguity to give a false impression. Hopefully, as you conduct research, you will come across a variety of perspectives and facts that enable you to create opinions for yourself. That is great, but there is no place for opinions in a formal paper. The author is invisible, even when you are expressing your own opinions. You can say things like, "the information shows," or "based on these statistics." There are a lot of ways to phrase your conclusions. Analysis like this is part of a great paper. No matter what the analysis is, though, you have to prove how to reach that conclusion. In this example, there are several places where statements are given, and if a reasonable conclusion were reached, there would be facts that led to it. Each of the items that leads to your conclusions must have a citation. I hope you see how ridiculous this statement, "the amount of slaves being held by the South was a tremendous amount," is. This is clearly not a citable statement. Think back a few slides to qualifying words. If this is what the source actually said, you need a new source. There are specific numbers. In this case, when the Civil War began, there were just under 4 million. It is really easy to get actual facts. These numbers came from the U.S. Census Bureau.
The sweet spot is where you have just a bit more information than you have room for. Say you're looking at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. It turns out to be a surprisingly big topic. After doing some research, you find you're most interested in the common causes of death among the inmates. You could have focused on the types of prisoners or on notable persons associated with the camp or camp construction. Looking at all of these would create a book, not a paper. Make your choice and revise your research question so you can stay focused on it. Most papers required in college are going to be 1,000 to 1,500 words. That may sound like a lot, but we're going to look at what those numbers really mean. So first, you need an introduction with a thesis statement. That's about 75 words. And you'll need a conclusion that revisits all your points. Another 75 words. That's 150 already, leaving only 850 for your three main topics, about 280 words each. Your body paragraphs will be the biggest part, but each paragraph will end up only having about 100 words. When you think back to each paragraph needing an intro, development, and evidence, that adds up to 100 pretty fast.
Well, this has been a little warm-up. Next, we will look at some of these subjects in more detail. As always, if you have any questions, contact one of your librarians.